Matt, thank you very much for joining us today, and it's so nice to be here in person. Would you like to give us a very quick introduction to yourself and where you are?
Yeah, so I'm Matt Fryer. I'm Head of Legal Services at Brookson Legal. I've been working in the contractor sector for 11 years now for Brookson Group. And at the moment, as you can imagine, we're very busy helping contractors, recruiters and end hirers get their heads around this legislative change due to come in April.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are here today to talk about IR35. For those of us in the audience that don't know what it is, what is IR35?
Yeah, so IR35 is the name given to the Inland Revenue's release back in April 2000, where they released some new rules around managing employment status for people who aren't employed. Mm-hmm. And it's all around making sure that if someone is a disguised employee, they're paying the right amount of tax and national insurance that an employee would. So it's specifically aimed at contractors who work through their own personal service company, and it's trying to make sure that the correct amount of tax is paid. 6 months left, which I think 6 months is an adequate time for most businesses to get ready, but we need to get cracking now. I think the big challenge we saw from clients we act for last time round was identifying contractors in the business. You find pockets of contractors that departments or hiring managers have just hired themselves outside of normal processes. So don't underestimate the time to identify the impacted population. Certainly reach out and make contact with your supply chain and your recruitment agency partners. They should be clued up on this, and they're probably chomping at the bit to help you. So take that help. And also don't forget about the contractors. I think there's a journey here for them to be brought along with you. So education and communication with contractors, I think, is crucial to avoid the challenges or contractors being upset when they deliver the outcome and they don't understand how you've got there. So I think they're some key practical steps that we can be getting on with now.
There's obviously a grey area. You've got the blueprint, but you've got judgment. How does that grey area affect the end hirer and the contractor?
Yeah, and I think you've pinpointed there the biggest challenge with that. It isn't an exact science, and there's lots of moving parts in this, and it does require to stand back and look at the whole construct and come to a decision. So it's actually quite difficult if you've not been involved in IR35 decision making before. So I can understand why people are worried about it, why people are trying to find a way around it, but I think this is all about knowledge and experience now. Remember, the change is from April next year, so clearly there's a big learning curve for people to go on, and it may take some time to get there, but clearly there's lots of experts out there that can support. HMRC have offered guidance on the website, so there are tools out there, but I think this is an education process initially, and then it will come with experience. This is one of the other factors with this. Who owns this risk? Who owns this issue? And our experience is it typically, the hot potato is thrown around between finance, between HR, between procurement, and between legal. And we're seeing it typically land in HR or internal recruitment teams. So that's why I suspect your members are being tasked with, certainly if not leading, but will be very integral to the project. And when you think about making that employment status decision, it's about understanding the on-the-ground working practices. So the hiring manager are particularly important in this because they're probably closer to the contractor. They'll be able to understand and explain how they are treated and managed on the ground. So we typically see HR or internal recruitment leading the project, but with very close buy-in from hiring managers across the organisation.
What is reasonable care, and how can employers prove that is what they've actioned over the next 6 months?
Yeah, so reasonable care isn't defined in the legislation, unfortunately.
That'd be helpful.
It would, yeah. I mean, HMRC have got a habit of bringing these rules out, and the key point that everyone needs to understand, they leave it open to interpretation. But what we do have now is guidance that's on HMRC's website. It's there to see, and it talks about, first of all, they expect a large business with lots of financial resource and lots of human resource, you would have a higher threshold. If you're a smaller business, you'd have a lower threshold. So bigger businesses, they're expecting them to get this right. And then when you look at it, the guidance that they've published talks about making sure that whoever's responsible for that decision-making process understands IR35, has educated themselves, has read HMRC's guidance. HMRC have got a tool out there, the SES tool. Again, if you're going to use that, you need to demonstrate that you understand the nuances of the questions, you understand the guidance, and you've answered those questions correctly. The journey to reasonable care is very much education first, also documenting what you've done. So you've got that audit trail when HMRC do come along. And the key point for me is don't forget about this in April 21. That's actually when it starts. So there's lots of prep to do, but that reasonable care criteria now is in place going forward from April 21.
Is CEST the answer? And for those who don't know what CEST is, what is it?
Yeah, so CEST is HMRC's check employment status for tax tool. So this was a tool that is free. It's a free resource online. It's been available for a couple of years now. And I think it's HMRC's way of saying, this is easy, guys, just go online and plug some answers to these questions and it'll give you an output. So I think the intention is admirable, but when you look at CEST, it can trip you up. So it's giving between 15 and 20% I don't know answers. And the direction there is phone HMRC. It's clearly weighted in HMRC's favour. It ignores one of the key employment status tests that I talked about earlier, the mutuality of obligation point. So it's a cheap, free, easy option for you, but it does come with a bit of a health warning. Some people tend to use CEST as a bit of an indicator to do an initial sense check. But when it gets to the crux of making that decision and issuing that status determination statement, you find some people a little nervous and actually want a more thorough process to go through.
So similar with any online free tool, just keep an eye on it. It's not always going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Do we need to increase pay rates for captured contractors?
Yeah, so the whole impact on pay rate question is a key one, really. As I said earlier, the impact of IR35 is that some contractors will receive a reduction in take-home pay because there's more tax and national insurance being paid. Their natural reaction will be, pay me some more or I'm going to leave. Now, there's no mechanism in the legislation that says you have to increase the pay rate. This is purely about making sure the right amount of tax is paid. We've seen some extremes here. Some clients, particularly for high-risk roles where they can't backfill and they really want to keep that individual, then there's a commercial decision to be made there, isn't there? You pay more to retain them. There's some population of workers who actually should always have been inside IR35. If they'd applied the rules correctly themselves, they would be receiving less take-home pay than they are now. So there is an argument that in that instance, no, there's no increase in take-home pay because that's the amount you should have been getting if you'd applying the rules correctly yourselves. So it is commercial. It's a commercial decision, and it's around attraction and retention of contractors in your business. And I think one of the key messages I give is if your IR35 review process is robust, you are going to minimise the number of challenges and the number of contractors asking for pay rates. We see, I'm sure we've all heard about the blanket bans in the market, where say no PSCs, everyone needs to go pay as you earn. Straight away you've got a big commercial headache and all you're going to be talking about is pay rates. Actually, stop that happening by doing a proper review and applying the rules correctly to your business. In terms of contractor queries, there is a requirement under legislation for end hirers to have a challenge process. So you design that yourself. But my take on that is let's not get to the challenge process. Let's get ahead of that and let's keep the contractors engaged and on board. So we've worked with some clients who set up regular contractor forums, so maybe once a month over the next 6 months via webinar or a Teams call, or actually written comms. This is the project plan, this is where we're at, these are some of the blockers we've had, these are some of the positives. Just keep them engaged in terms of where you're going. At least even if they're landed with a captured or inside IR35 decision, at least they can say, well, I know they've gone through a proper process and not just landed a blanket ban on me. So I think that's point one. If you do get to the point of issuing that status determination statement and the contractor challenges, then you've got 45 days under the legislation to respond to that. And my view on that is that's a triage process. So if they're just saying, what's this, it's an SDS, and they don't know what the rules are, then clearly that's just a conversation around IR35. You'll find some who might come back with their own externally procured IR35 decision. So you need to think about whether you're clued up enough or capable internally to essentially mediate that, or again, whether you want some external support to do that.
Do employers need to do anything after April, or is it a cut-off point essentially?
Yeah. So most certainly they do. So there's two pieces of work here. There's a hump of work between now and April 21, which is assessing those incumbent contractors. But clearly post-April, you may have new contractors in the business. You may have new roles cropping up that need filling. You also may have changes in your business and changes in working practices. So there's an ongoing obligation now actually to assess IR35, and that assessment needs to be presented to the candidates before they sort of take the role. So you need to be, and again this is where your agencies can help you. I envisage people advertising contract roles with an inside or outside IR35 status post-April. So it's really crucial you get on top of that as part of your hiring process. It's a new BAU. And also, we'd certainly recommend every 6 months you re-reviewing incumbent contractors who are still in role. So it's April 21 is really the start of this.